The coffee maker was broken again. Third time this month, and somehow it was always my fault for using it wrong. I stared at the stupid machine like it held the secrets of the universe, when really, all I wanted was caffeine to survive another day of being professionally invisible. "Sarah, did you finish those reports?" Marcus called from his corner desk, not bothering to look up from whatever game he was probably playing on his phone. Marcus, the guy who'd been here exactly 3 weeks longer than me, but acted like he invented spreadsheets. "Sent them an hour ago," I replied, watching him finally check his email with that surprised look he always got when he realized other people actually did work around here. The thing about being the only woman on a 5-person marketing team is that you become really good at reading the room. And this room? It was about as welcoming as a dentist's waiting area. There was Jake, who mansplained my own ideas back to me on the regular. There was Tim, who somehow got credit for the campaign I'd pitched last month. And then there was our fearless leader, Mr. Davidson, who had the remarkable ability to hear male voices at frequencies completely inaudible when they came from my direction. I'd been working on something big for weeks, a complete rebrand strategy for our biggest client, the kind of project that could actually make a difference. The research was solid, the creative direction was fresh, and I'd run the numbers so many times I could recite them in my sleep. Today was the day I was finally going to present it. "Morning, team." Davidson burst through the door like he was announcing the winner of some game show nobody wanted to watch. His tie was crooked, his shirt had what looked suspiciously like breakfast stains, and he was carrying that energy of someone who'd had way too much coffee and not enough sleep. We gathered around the conference table, that wobbling piece of furniture that had seen better decades. I had my presentation ready, my notes organized, and that little flutter of nervous excitement that comes right before you're about to knock everyone's socks off. "So," Davidson said, settling into his chair with a dramatic sigh, "Jake's got something to show us about the Meridian account." "Wait, what?" Jake stood up with this sheepish grin that didn't look sheepish at all. "So I've been working on this rebrand concept. The next 15 minutes were like watching someone steal your car while you're standing right there with the keys in your hand. Every slide, every insight, every carefully crafted strategy point, it was all there. My work, my ideas, presented with Jake's signature confidence and Davidson's growing enthusiasm. "This is brilliant, Jake." Davidson was practically bouncing in his seat. "The market analysis, the demographic targeting, where did this come from?" I felt something hot and sharp rise in my chest. My hands were actually shaking as I watched Jake bask in praise for work he'd never even seen before today. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through their mutual admiration society, "I presented this exact concept to you 3 weeks ago. Davidson, remember? You said it needed more research. So Sarah." Davidson's voice had that warning tone that every woman in corporate America knows by heart. "I think you're confused. Jake's been developing this for months, haven't you, Jake?" Jake had the decency to look uncomfortable for about half a second before nodding. "Yeah, it's been a long process." The room went quiet except for the annoying hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant sound of someone's keyboard clicking away. Marcus was studying his hands like they held the meaning of life. Tim was suddenly very interested in his phone. And Jake was looking at me with this expression that somehow managed to be apologetic and smug at the same time. I could have let it go. Should have probably picked my battles, been a team player, all those helpful pieces of advice that basically translate to shut up and take it. But something about sitting there, watching my own work being celebrated while I was treated like I was having some kind of delusional episode, made something inside me snap. "You want to know what's really brilliant about this strategy?" I said, standing up and pulling out my laptop. "The fact that I have every draft, every email, every piece of research documented with timestamps going back 6 weeks, including the original presentation I sent to your email, Davidson, on March 15th at 2:47 p.m. The silence that followed was the kind you could cut with a knife and serve for dinner. You know that moment in movies when the hero dramatically reveals the truth, and everyone gasps, and the bad guy gets what's coming to them? Yeah, That's not how real life works. Davidson looked at my laptop screen, like I'd just shown him a picture of Bigfoot riding a unicorn. The email thread was right there, my original presentation. His response asking for more comprehensive market analysis, my follow-up with additional research, his receipts proving he'd seen everything. Well, he said, after what felt like an eternity, this is interesting. Interesting. Like finding out your ideas were stolen with some kind of mildly amusing office trivia. Jake was doing that thing guys do when they're caught red-handed but still trying to figure out how to make it not their fault. I mean, we all collaborate around here, right? Ideas bounce around. You know how it is. Bounce around. I could feel my voice getting higher, which was annoying because nothing says hysterical woman like a voice that could shatter glass. You literally copied my slide deck. Same fonts, same color scheme. Same typo on slide 7 where I wrote demographic instead of demographic. Davidson cleared his throat. Sarah, I think you're getting a little worked up over what's clearly just a case of parallel thinking. Parallel thinking. The laugh that came out of me was not a nice laugh. Is that what we're calling plagiarism now? Marcus finally looked up from his hands. Maybe we should all just take a step back and now you want to talk? I turned to face him. You've been sitting there like a statue this whole time. What? Suddenly you have opinions when I'm the one making waves? Tim was typing furiously on his phone, probably texting his girlfriend about the drama unfolding in conference room B. Jake was examining the ceiling tiles like they might contain an escape hatch. And Davidson was getting that look. The one that meant I was about to become the problem instead of the person pointing out the problem. You know what, Sarah? His voice had gone from corporate friendly to something considerably colder. I'm starting to think you have some real attitude issues. And there it was. The magic phrase that transforms legitimate grievances into personality flaws. Attitude issues, I repeated slowly. For wanting credit for my own work, for being disruptive, for not being a team player, for making accusations. They're not accusations if they're backed up by documentation. Davidson stood up, and suddenly the room felt a lot smaller. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're being defensive, argumentative, I'm being accurate. And frankly, this kind of behavior is exactly why your ideas don't get the reception you think they deserve. Oh, we were going there. Excuse me. Look, Sarah. He sat back down and folded his hands like he was about to deliver some profound wisdom. I'm going to be honest with you because I think you need to hear this. Your ideas, they're not bad, exactly. But they lack the kind of strategic thinking we need for high-level clients. They're more administrative in nature. Administrative because nothing says comprehensive market analysis with demographic targeting and competitor research like filing paperwork. But Jake's presentation shows real leadership potential. Initiative. The kind of big picture thinking that drives results. I stared at him. Actually stared. Because apparently, the same ideas became magically more strategic when they came out of a man's mouth. So let me get this straight, I said. My voice now perfectly calm in that dangerous way that probably should have warned him. My ideas are administrative busy work, but when Jake presents the exact same ideas, they're brilliant strategic thinking that shows leadership potential. That's exactly what you said. Davidson's face was starting to turn that particular shade of red that middle-aged white guys get when they realize they've said the quiet part out loud. I think you're twisting my words, am I? Because it sounds like you're saying, my work is only good when a man takes credit for it. The silence was back, but this time it felt different. Heavier. Like the moment before a storm hits when all the birds stop singing. Davidson stood up again, and this time when he spoke, his voice was ice cold. You know what? I've had enough of this attitude. You want to know what your real problem is, Sarah. I waited. You're useless. The words hit the room like a physical thing. Marcus actually flinched. Tim stopped typing. Jake's mouth fell open. You complain about not being heard, but maybe that's because you don't have anything worth saying. You think everything's about gender, but the truth is, you're just not good at your job. You're useless. And instead of accepting that and trying to improve, you want to blame everyone else for your failures. I felt something very strange happen in that moment. Instead of the hurt or anger I expected, there was this weird sense of clarity, like fog lifting, because suddenly everything made perfect sense. This wasn't about my work. It wasn't about my ideas. It wasn't even about Jake stealing credit. This was about a system so broken that a man could literally present a woman's work as his own, and when she complained about it, she became the problem. I closed my laptop very carefully and started packing up my things. "What are you doing?" Davidson asked. I looked up at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in the 2 years I'd worked there, I saw him clearly, not as a boss or an authority figure, but as exactly what he was. A small, insecure man who needed to tear down women to feel important. "Something I should have done a long time ago," I said. And that's when things got interesting. Packing up 2 years of your professional life turns out to be surprisingly quick when most of it fits in a cardboard box that used to hold printer paper. A succulent that somehow survived despite the office's commitment to killing all living things. A coffee mug with a chip in it that I'd grown weirdly attached to. My GD stapler, because you never know when you'll need a reliable stapler. And office supply stores are basically highway robbery. "Sarah, what exactly do you think you're doing?" Davison was using that tone people use when they're trying to sound authoritative but mostly just sound confused. "Well," I said, carefully wrapping my succulent in some old meeting notes, "I'm taking my useless self somewhere it might be more appreciated. You can't just leave in the middle of a workday." I stopped packing and looked at him. "Actually, I can. That's kind of how quitting works." "You're quitting." Tim had finally stopped texting and was staring at me like I'd announced I was joining the circus. Yep. I pulled open my desk drawer and started sorting through the accumulated junk of office life. Expired coupons, 17 pins that didn't work. A stress bowl from some corporate wellness initiative that was about as effective as thoughts and prayers. Consider this my 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately. "That's not how 2 weeks' notice works," Marcus said helpfully. "Thanks, Marcus. Really appreciate the HR guidance from someone who spent the last hour pretending he couldn't hear his coworker being called useless." Davidson was turning that red color again. "You're being ridiculous. You can't quit over one conversation." "One conversation?" I laughed, and it came out sharper than I intended. "Davidson, this isn't about one conversation. This is about 2 years of my ideas being dismissed, ignored, or straight up stolen. 2 years of being talked over in meetings, having my work explained back to me by men who weren't even in the room when I presented it, and being told I need to speak up more while simultaneously being told I'm too aggressive when I do." I found a photo of my niece tucked behind my monitor and added it to the box. 8 years old and already smarter than half the men in this room. "You're overreacting," Davigiso said, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. "And my Jake literally stole my presentation, my research, my analysis, my recommendations, and when I called him out on it, you told me I was confused. Then you said my work was administrative, but his was strategic. The exact same work, Davidson, and when I pointed out how insane that was, you called me useless." Jake finally found his voice. "Look, Sarah, I never meant for this to what? To get caught." I turned to face him. "Because you seemed pretty comfortable taking credit until I showed up with receipts. I thought we were all collaborating. I tasted the word like it was something spoiled. Is that what we're calling it? When you take someone's work and present it as your own without mentioning their name? Because where I come from, we call that theft." The room had gone quiet again, but this time I didn't care. There's something liberating about burning bridges when you realize they were leading nowhere good anyway. "You know what the really funny part is?" I continued, taping up my box. "I actually liked working here. I thought this was just how corporate life was, that eventually, if I worked hard enough and was good enough, things would get better." I blamed myself for not being assertive enough, for not playing the game right, for not figuring out the secret code that would make you all take me seriously. I stood up and hefted the box under my arm. It was lighter than I expected, but watching Jake get praise for presenting my work while you called me useless for objecting to it, that was educational. Really clarified some things for me. Davidson was looking panicked now, probably realizing he was about to lose the person who actually did most of the work around here. Sarah, let's not be hasty. Why don't we sit down and discuss this like adults? Like adults. I stopped at the conference room door. Adults don't steal credit for other people's work. Adults don't call their employees useless for standing up for themselves. And adults sure as hell don't try to gaslight someone into thinking documented plagiarism is parallel thinking. I looked around the room one last time. Marcus was still studying his hands like they held the secrets of the universe. Tim was back to his phone, probably live tweeting this whole disaster. Jake was slumped in his chair, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. And Davidson was standing there with his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For what it's worth, I said, the Meridian campaign, my campaign is going to fail. You know why? Because you only stole the presentation. You don't have any of the research behind it, the market analysis that backs up those recommendations, or the implementation strategy that makes it actually work. Jake's going to crash and burn. And when the client asks follow-up questions he can't answer, they're going to figure out pretty quickly that he has no idea what he's talking about. Jake's face went pale. Wait, there's more. Oh, there's always more, Jake. That's what actual strategic thinking looks like. I walked to the door, then paused. Davidson, next time you want to call someone useless, maybe make sure they're not the person keeping your whole department from falling apart. And with that, I walked out of conference room B, past the broken coffee maker, and straight to the elevator. The really weird part, I was smiling. The elevator ride down felt like the longest and shortest 30 seconds of my life. Long because I kept expecting Davidson to come running after me with some half-hearted apology and a promise that things would be different. Short because once those doors opened, I'd be officially unemployed for the first time since college. My phone started buzzing before I even made it to the parking lot. Sarah? What the hell just happened up there? It was my friend Melissa from accounting, and she sounded like she'd just witnessed a car crash. Did the gossip network already reach the 3rd floor? I asked, fumbling for my car keys. Girl, Tim posted about it on the company Slack, with popcorn emoji. Of course he did. What exactly did he say? Quote, Sarah just quit in the most epic way possible. Davison looks like he swallowed a lemon. End quote. 3 flame emojis and something about corporate drama being better than Netflix. I couldn't help but laugh. Well, at least someone's entertained. Are you insane? You just quit without another job lined up. And there it was. The question I'd been avoiding thinking about for the last 20 minutes. In the moment walking out had felt like the most rational thing in the world. Now, sitting in my car in a corporate parking lot with a box of office supplies and no paycheck coming next week, it felt slightly more complicated. Yeah, I said. I think I might be. 3 days later, I was still in my pajamas at 2 in the afternoon, which was either depression or liberation. I couldn't tell which. My savings account was looking at me judgmentally. My LinkedIn had more activity than it had seen in years, and I'd eaten cereal for lunch because cooking seemed like an unreasonable expectation for someone navigating an existential crisis. The doorbell rang, which was weird because I hadn't ordered anything and my social life had basically evaporated along with my employment status. I opened the door to find a woman I didn't recognize, holding a coffee and looking like she'd stepped out of a business magazine. Sharp suit, perfect hair, the kind of confidence that suggested she'd never been called useless in a conference room. Sarah Martinez, she asked. Depends who's asking, I replied, suddenly very aware of my pajama situation. Rebecca Chun, senior partner at Chun & Associates. I heard you recently became available. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that suggested she knew something I didn't. Mind if I come in? I have a proposition for you. 5 minutes later, we were sitting in my kitchen while Rebecca explained how she'd heard about my very public resignation through what she called the professional grapevine, but what I suspected was actually LinkedIn gossip. Your reputation precedes you, she said, sipping the coffee she'd brought. The Meridian campaign you developed, I've been watching that client for months. They're exactly the kind of company we want to work with. You know about the campaign? I know a lot of things, including the fact that your former colleague is currently scrambling to answer client questions he can't handle. And Davidson is having some very uncomfortable conversations with upper management about why his star employee just walked out. I felt a little flutter of satisfaction. Jake's struggling. Jake is drowning. They moved up the client presentation by a week, and apparently he's been calling in sick with food poisoning for the last 2 days. The mental image of Jake hiding in his apartment, probably Googling market analysis for dummies, was almost enough to make this whole disaster worthwhile. But that's not why I'm here, Rebecca continued. I'm here because I run a boutique marketing firm that specializes in exactly the kind of strategic thinking your old boss apparently couldn't recognize. We're small, we're selective, and we don't steal credit from our team members. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. I nearly choked on my coffee. I'm sorry, what? You have something most people in this industry don't. Integrity. Plus, you're clearly talented. You have experience with high-level clients, and you just proved you won't put up with toxic workplace bullshit. Those are rare qualities. I stared at her. 3 days ago, I was being called useless. Now, someone was offering me a partnership. There's one catch, Rebecca said. Of course there was. What? We want the Meridian account, and since you developed the original strategy, you're the only one who can properly execute it. The pieces clicked into place. You want me to poach my former client? I want you to offer them the service they deserve, delivered by the person who actually created their campaign strategy. What they do with that information is up to them. My phone buzzed. A text from Davison. We need to talk. Client meeting moved to Monday. Emergency. I showed Rebecca the message. Interesting timing, she said. What do you think? I thought about 2 years of being invisible. I thought about Jake presenting my work while I sat there like furniture. I thought about Davidson's face when he called me useless, and the way the other guys just sat there and let it happen. Then I thought about integrity and partnerships, and the possibility that maybe being called useless was the best thing that ever happened to me. I think, I said, Davidson's about to have a very bad Monday. Rebecca's smile was pure shark. I was hoping you'd say that. Monday morning found me in a conference room that didn't smell like desperation and broken dreams. Rebecca's office was everything my old workplace wasn't. Natural light, plants that were actually alive, and a coffee machine that worked on the first try. Small miracles. Ready for this? Rebecca asked, checking her watch. I straightened my blazer, the good one I'd been saving for special occasions, and nodded. Born, ready. The Meridian client meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at their downtown office. According to Rebecca's intel, and by intel, I mean Melissa from accounting, who apparently had friends everywhere, Davidson and Jake would be presenting at 9:30. We'd arranged our meeting for right after theirs. Perfect timing for what Rebecca had dubbed Operation Actually Competent. My phone had been buzzing all morning with increasingly frantic messages from Davidson. 8:15 a.m., Sarah, we really need to discuss your transition timeline. 8:32 a.m. Client has follow-up questions. Need your notes ASAP. 8:44 am. This is unprofessional. Call me back. 8:57 a.m. Please. That last one almost made me feel bad. Almost. At 9:45, Rebecca and I were sitting in the Meridian Building's lobby when Davidson and Jake emerged from the elevators. Davidson looked like he'd aged 5 years in a week. Jake looked like he was contemplating a career change to something less stressful, like bomb disposal. They didn't see us, which was probably for the best. Jake was muttering something about demographic variance, which wasn't even a real term, while Davidson kept checking his phone like it might magically produce the answers they needed. Think it went well, Rebecca whispered. About as well as you'd expect when someone tries to explain work they didn't actually do. At exactly 10 a.m., we were escorted to the same conference room they'd just vacated. The energy in there was interesting, like the aftermath of a particularly awkward dinner party. Margaret Hoffman, Meridian's CMO, looked tired. Ms. Chun, Ms. Martinez, Thank you for coming. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Rebecca replied smoothly. I know this is unusual timing. Unusual is one word for it. Margaret's smile was polite but strained. Your email mentioned you had insights about our rebranding strategy. This was it. The moment where I either proved that walking out of that conference room was the smartest thing I'd ever done, or confirmed Davidson's assessment that I was in fact useless. I do, I said, opening my laptop, because I created it. For the next 45 minutes, I walked them through the real strategy, not Jake's butcher presentation, but the complete analysis, the market research that showed why their target demographic was shifting, the competitive analysis that revealed gaps their competitors hadn't noticed, the implementation timeline that actually made sense. Margaret's team asked questions, real questions, the kind that came from actually understanding the strategy instead of just reading slides. And I had answers. All have them. This is significantly more comprehensive than what we saw earlier, Margaret said finally. The earlier presentation was incomplete, I replied diplomatically. Incomplete. She exchanged glances with her team. That's an interesting way to put it. Rebecca leaned forward. What Sarah's too polite to say is that her former colleagues presented her work without her knowledge or consent. She developed this entire strategy, and when she tried to get credit for it, she was told she was being disruptive. Margaret's expression shifted. Are you saying the previous presentation was plagiarized? I'm saying I have 2 years of documented evidence showing that my contributions were consistently minimized, dismissed, or stolen outright. Last week, when I objected to having my work presented by someone else, my boss called me useless and suggested my ideas lacked strategic thinking. The same ideas that were just presented to us as brilliant strategic thinking. The very same. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. And now you're working with Chun and Associates. As a partner, Rebecca said, Sarah brings exactly the kind of strategic insight and integrity we value. My phone buzzed. Another text from Davidson. Client wants to reschedule implementation. Help. I showed it to Margaret. Interesting timing, she said dryly. Miss Hoffman, I said, I understand this puts you in a difficult position. You've already engaged with my former company, and switching consultants mid-project isn't ideal. But I can offer you something they can't, actual understanding of the strategy behind the recommendations. Not just the presentation, but the reasoning, the research, and the implementation plan that makes it work. Margaret looked at her team, then back at you. What exactly are you proposing? Give us 2 weeks to deliver a pilot implementation of the first phase. If you're not completely satisfied, you can go back to your original consultants with no hard feelings. And if we are satisfied, Rebecca smiled. Then you get to work with the person who actually created the strategy you liked enough to hire in the first place. 3 hours later, I was back in Rebecca's office with a signed contract and a very full inbox. Melissa had texted me 17 times with updates from the office gossip network. Apparently, Davidson had called an emergency meeting. Jake had been seen stress eating in the break room, and Tim was taking bets on how long until someone got fired. How does it feel? Rebecca asked, handing me a glass of champagne that seemed way too fancy for a Tuesday afternoon. Honestly, like I should have done this 2 years ago. My phone rang. Davidson again. You should probably answer that, Rebecca said. I hit speaker. Hello, Davidson. Sarah, his voice was careful, controlled. I think we need to have a conversation about your transition back to the team. I think there may have been some misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? I looked at Rebecca, who was trying not to laugh. Like the misunderstanding where you called me useless. That was taken out of context. What context makes your useless sound better? Silence. Davidson, I'm not coming back. I've moved on to a company that values my contributions and doesn't steal credit for my work, but thanks for the call. Sarah, wait, I hung up. Think he's figured out you took the client? Rebecca asked. Oh, he's definitely figured it out. My phone immediately started ringing again. I turned it off. You know what the best part is? I said, settling into my new office chair, which actually had proper lumbar support and didn't squeak when I moved. What's that? For 2 years, I thought the problem was me. I thought I wasn't good enough, wasn't assertive enough, wasn't playing the game right. Turns out, the game was rigged from the start. And now, I looked around my new office, at the contract on my desk, at the business cards that would soon say, Sarah Martini, partner, instead of just marketing associate. Now I'm not playing their game anymore. I'm playing mine. Outside, it was starting to rain, but for the first time in years, I wasn't worried about getting caught in the storm. I was too busy dancing in it. 6 months later, Chun and Martinez Associates had landed 3 more major clients, all of whom had heard about us through word-of-mouth recommendations from very satisfied customers. Jake had been quietly let go after the Meridian disaster. Marcus had been promoted to fill the gap, good for him. And Davidson had been transferred to a smaller branch office where his management style could do less damage. As for me, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, all along. It just took being called useless to figure that out. Funny how the worst thing someone ever said to me turned out to be the best career advice I never knew I needed.